In the exhilarating world of the UFC, one list stands as a testament to supreme skill and unmatched prowess: the UFC pound for pound ranking. Yet one of the arguments that'll never be settled is over the world's best pound for pound fighter. With so few fighters who possess the ability to fight in multiple weight classes, the debate seems to rage on no matter what accomplishments these great champions seem to achieve. But before we get into the discussion of the top 10, do you know how this debate started? Well, in February 2013, a voting panel made up of MMA media members introduced UFC rankings by weight class and pound for pound prominence. A fighter is supposed to be active in the UFC to be eligible for rankings. 15 fighters are ranked for each weight class and pound for pound rankings. A fighter can appear in more than one weight class except for champions and interim champions, who are deemed eligible for rankings by weight class. However, champions and interim champions can be voted on for pound and pound ranking. Now it's time to get down to the nitty gritty and rank the GOATs of mixed martial arts. He was a dominant force in the welterweight division, winning the UFC title twice and defending it 7 times. He fought and beat some of the best fighters of his era, including Carlos Newton, Sean Sherk, Georges St-Pierre, BJ Penn, and Matt Serra. He also had an incredible work ethic, fighting 9 times in 1 year in 2001. He's a UFC Hall of Famer and one of the greatest wrestlers to ever compete in MMA. He's also known for his epic rivalry with St-Pierre, who he defeated once but lost to twice in title fights. He retired from MMA in 2013 with a record of 45-9 and was inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame in 2010. He is a global superstar who transcended the sport with his charisma, trash talk, and knockout power. He became the first fighter to hold 2 UFC titles simultaneously, when he knocked out Jose Aldo in 13 seconds to win the featherweight belt, and then Eddie Alvarez to win the lightweight belt. He also had an impressive run in the featherweight division, finishing all but one of his opponents by knockout or submission. He's one of the most exciting and entertaining fighters of all time, but he never defended either one of his titles, and lost some key fights against Nate Diaz and Khabib Nurmagomedov. He is also known for his crossover into boxing, where he faced Floyd Mayweather in a lucrative bout that he lost by TKO in the 10th round. He has a record of 22-6 in MMA and is still active as a fighter. He is another fighter who achieved the rare feat of holding 2 UFC titles at the same time, in his case, light heavyweight and heavyweight. Cormier has toppled top fighters in both divisions across Strikeforce and UFC, defending the light heavyweight title 3 times and the heavyweight belt once. Cormier can never truly establish himself as the top lightweight in the world, as he lost to John Jones twice, though one was ultimately ruled a no contest after Jones failed a drug test, and his title reign was a product of Jones's failings more than anything. Cormier dropped the final 2 fights of his trilogy with Stipe Miocic for the heavyweight crown, but DC's resume still stands the test of time for its many accomplishments. He is also a former Olympic wrestler who competed in the 2004 and 2008 game, and a respected commentator and analyst for the UFC. He retired from MMA in 2020 with a record of 22-3 and was inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame in 2022. He's the undisputed king of the featherweight division, where he reigned for almost a decade. He won 18 straight fights from 2006 to 2014, capturing the WEC and UFC titles along the way. He defeated some of the best fighters in the world, such as Mike Thomas Brown, Uriah Faber, Frankie Edgar, Chad Mendes, and Ricardo Lamas. He also holds the record for the most leg kicks in a UFC fight, with 68 against Uriah Faber. He's a master of Muay Thai, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and wrestling, and has shown incredible speed, power, and durability. His only losses in featherweight come against Conor McGregor, Max Holloway, and Alexander Volkanovski, who are all champions themselves. He also dropped to bantamweight in 2020 and challenged Petr Yan for the vacant title, but lost by TKO in the 5th round. He is still active as a fighter and has a record of 29-7. He's a UFC Hall of Famer and one of the greatest strikers of all time. Now, we've reached the halfway point of our list of the top 10 pound for pound fighters of all time. But before we move on to the next, let's take a moment to explore how the concept of pound for pound came into being in MMA. The term pound for pound was originally used in boxing to compare fighters across different weight classes based on their skill and performance, not their size or strength. The term was first associated with Sugar Ray Robinson, who is widely considered to be the most skilled boxer of his time and one of the greatest of all time. In MMA, the term pound for pound was adopted to rank fighters who excelled in multiple aspects of the sport, such as striking, wrestling, grappling, and submissions. The term also reflected the diversity and evolution of MMA, as fighters from different backgrounds and disciplines competed against each other. One of the pioneers of the pound for pound concept in MMA was Mark Coleman, who was a wrestler and former UFC heavyweight champion. He introduced the technique of ground and pound, which involved taking down his opponents and striking them with punches and elbows from the top position. He used this technique to dominate some of the best fighters in his division, such as Dan Severn, Maurice Smith, and Don Frye. He also won the Pride Grand Prix in 2000, defeating 3 opponents in one night. Coleman's success inspired other fighters to adopt and improve the ground and pound technique, such as Randy Couture, Tito Ortiz, and Matt Hughes. These fighters also demonstrated their versatility and adaptability by learning other skills, such as boxing, kickboxing, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and Muay Thai. They became some of the most dominant champions in their respective divisions and earned recognition as some of the best pound-for-pound fighters in MMA history. The term pound-for-pound has since become a common way of ranking and comparing fighters in MMA, regardless of their weight class or style. However, as we mentioned earlier, there is no official or objective way of determining who is the best pound-for-pound fighter in the world, and different sources may have different opinions and ranking. That is why we've created our own list based on our own criteria and analysis. We hope you enjoyed and agree with our picks. Now that we've explained how the term pound-for-pound came into being in MMA, let's resume our countdown with number 6. He's the only fighter on this list who retired undefeated, with a perfect record of 29-0. He dominated the lightweight division like no one else, winning the UFC title and defending it 3 times. He also holds the record for the most takedowns in a single UFC fight, with 21 against Abel Trujillo. He's a phenomenal wrestler and grappler who has used his sambo, judo, and combat sambo skills to control and finish his opponents. He's beaten some of the best lightweights in history, such as Rafael dos Anjos, Dustin Poirier, Justin Gaethje, and Conor McGregor. His win over McGregor was one of the biggest fights in UFC history, drawing over 2 million pay-per-view buys. He retired in 2020 after defeating Gaethje by submission, citing his promise to his mother not to fight without his father, who passed away earlier that year. He's widely regarded as one of the greatest mixed martial artists of all time and the best lightweight ever. He is the former UFC flyweight champion. He has won titles in 2 different promotions and has been one of the most consistent and dominant fighters in MMA history. He has a record of 30-3-1 with 12 wins by knockout and 8 by submission. He also holds the record for the most consecutive title defenses in UFC history with 11. He's a well-rounded fighter who can strike, wrestle, and grapple at an elite level. He has shown amazing creativity and innovation in his fights, such as his flying armbar against Ray Borg and his suplex into armbar against Kyoji Horiguchi. He has defeated some of the best flyweights in the world, such as Joseph Benavidez, John Dodson, Henry Cejudo, and Adriano Moraes. His only losses come against Dominic Cruz, Cejudo, and Moraes, who are all champions themselves. He is still active as a fighter and is considered one of the greatest mixed martial artists of all time and the best flyweight ever. We're getting closer to the top of our list of the top 10 pound-for-pound fighters of all time, where we honor the best and most versatile mixed martial artists in history. Let's see who's in the top 4. He is the legendary heavyweight who ruled the Pride organization for years. He won 27 fights in a row from 2001 to 2009, becoming the Pride heavyweight champion and defeating some of the biggest names in the sport, such as Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira, Mirko Cro Cop, Mark Coleman, and Tim Sylvia. He was known for his devastating power, his iron chin, and his calm demeanor. He also had a fierce rivalry with Nogueira, whom he fought 3 times and beat twice. He never fought in the UFC, but he was widely regarded as the best heavyweight of all time and one of the greatest fighters ever. His unbeaten streak ended in 2010 when he was submitted by Fabricio Verdum. He retired in 2021 with a record of 39-6-14. He's the greatest welterweight of all time and one of the most dominant champions in UFC history. He won the UFC welterweight title twice and defended it 9 times, beating some of the best fighters in the division, such as Matt Hughes, Matt Serra, John Fitch, BJ Penn, Carlos Condit, and Nick Diaz. He only lost to 2 men in his career, Hughes and Serra, and he avenged both losses convincingly. He was known for his incredible athleticism, his technical striking, his wrestling, and his game plan. He also showed great sportsmanship and professionalism throughout his career. He retired in 2013 after a controversial win over Johnny Hendricks, but he came back in 2017 to challenge Michael Bisping for the middleweight title. He won by submission in the 3rd round, becoming the 4th fighter to win titles in 2 different weight classes in the UFC. He retired again in 2019 with a record of 26-2. Before we reveal our top 2 picks, let's talk about the concept of pound for pound and why it is so controversial in MMA. It is a hypothetical and subjective way of ranking fighters that often sparks debates among fans, media, and fighters themselves. As we said, there is no official or objective criteria to determine who is the best pound-for-pound fighter in the world, and different sources may have different opinions and rankings. Some of the factors that are usually considered when evaluating a fighter's pound-for-pound status are their record and resume, how many wins and losses they have, who they fought and beaten, how dominant or close their fights were, how many titles or defenses they have, secondly their skill and style, how well-rounded or specialized they are, what techniques or strategies they use, how creative or innovative they are, how to adapt to different opponents or situations, thirdly their achievements and legacy, how long they've been at the top of their division or sport, how many records or awards they've broken or won, how much influence or impact they've had on the sport or culture. However, these factors are not always easy to measure or compare, and different people may value them differently. For example, some may favor fighters who have won titles in multiple weight classes, while others may prefer fighters who have dominated one division for a long time. Some may favor fighters who have faced tougher competition, while others may prefer fighters who have finished most of their opponents. Some may favor fighters who have been consistent and clean, while others may overlook fighters who have had controversies or setbacks. Therefore, there is no definitive answer to the question of who is the best pound-for-pound fighter of all time, and there will always be room for debate and disagreement. However, this also makes the sport more interesting and exciting, as fans can enjoy watching different fighters showcase their skills and talents in different ways. With that said, let's move on to our top 2 picks. He is the former UFC middleweight champion and one of the most spectacular strikers in MMA history. He has won 17 fights in a row from 2006 to 2013, becoming the longest reigning UFC champion ever with 10 successful title defenses. He also fought 3 times at light heavyweight and won by knockout each time. He defeated some of the best fighters in the world, such as Rich Franklin, Dan Henderson, Vitor Belfort, Chael Sonnen, and Forrest Griffin. He also displayed incredible skill and style in his fights, using his Muay Thai, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and Taekwondo to deliver amazing knockouts and submissions. He often toyed with his opponents, dodging their punches with ease or taunting them with his hands down. He was widely regarded as the best fighter in the world and the best pound-for-pound fighter of his era. He is the current UFC heavyweight champion and the former UFC light heavyweight champion. He's won 2 titles in 2 different weight classes and has never been defeated in a fight. His only loss was by disqualification due to illegal elbows. He has fought 23 times in the UFC and won 22 of them, breaking records for the most title fight wins of 15, the most title defenses at light heavyweight of 8, and the longest unbeaten streak of 19. He has beaten some of the best fighters in history, such as Daniel Cormier, Alexander Gustafsson, Lyoto Machida, Rashad Evans, and Shogun Rua. He has also shown amazing skills and versatility in his fights, using his wrestling, striking, grappling, and elbows to dominate his opponents. He has also made impressive adjustments and adaptations in his fights, overcoming adversity or changing his game plan when needed. He cemented his status as the best fighter of all time by moving up to heavyweight and submitting Ciryl Gane in his first fight of that division. So there you have it, our list of the top 10 pound-for-pound fighters of all time. Do you agree with our picks? Who would you put on your list? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more MMA content. Thanks for watching!